Hello, Trevor.
Hello, Jeff.
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We're here for the Planning and Development Committee meeting, 11th February 2025. I'd like to welcome the Planning and Development Committee, sitting to my left, and to all councillors and to everyone in the gallery here, as well as everyone who is watching on the live stream. Obviously, there's a few people still entering the room. We do have some absences today, which would include Councillor O'Shea, and Mayor Jeff is on Teams. Firstly, I'd start with, I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines transverse these lands. We meet on Waka Waka land, Guybil land and Jarrawa land, and the peoples, and pay their respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. So we now go on to any declarations, prescribed interests or anything like that. Anyone has got any? If not, if during the meeting something comes up, can you please advise me? At this stage, no. Councillor Tim?
Sorry, Chair, do you need a leave of absence for Councillor Cahill?
I presume he is coming, so at this stage, we'll leave it at this stage. He hasn't notified myself or Acting CEO Nick about his absence, so we presume he's just been held up or something. But Councillor O'Shea is away and Councillor McDonald is online. So with conflicts, if there is a conflict raised at a meeting and council business was not aware of it beforehand, the chair, as in myself, is to refer it to the item itself by referencing PC 01 or DC 01 made on item 2 and indicate whether the councillor is to stay or leave. A division is required on these items with a conflict, but nothing's been raised at this stage. But if we come across one during the meeting, obviously we deal with it. I will now hand over to Josh Leddy, Principal Strategic Infrastructure Planning, and he will run through the details of proposals. And welcome, Councillor Cale.
Morning, councillors. This morning I've got a report here to present for a request for discounted infrastructure, a discount to the infrastructure charges for the development approval for the gasworks. The site's located at 1A to 3 Neil Street, Toowoomba. I think you'll be pretty familiar with the site. There was a development approval over the site issued last year for multiple dwellings, which included 56 units, and for a shopping centre. I have included some attachments in there for some artist impressions. I've also included some approved plans as well. The development is 10 stories, and the shopping centre component includes approximately 6,000 square metres of gross floor area, and that's a breakdown of supermarket and also smaller tenancies. The site is located within the Toowoomba Railway Parklands priority development area. So it was actually assessed and approved under the Toowoomba Railway Parklands Development Scheme. And that's also under the Economic Development Act, and that will be of note a little bit later on. The infrastructure charge, we issued an infrastructure charges notice for $2,474,612.75. And that included a credit for the existing industrial uses of the site, being the gasworks. I think of note there, approximately $1.5 million of that 2.4 was for the multiple dwelling component. So yeah, about approximately 1.474 was for the supermarket and shops. A request has been lodged by the applicant for a discounted infrastructure charge under the Toowoomba CBD incentives policy. This request does not strictly meet the criteria, but we believe that has some merit, and we are putting it forward to this committee for consideration. So the request, the approval does meet the purpose of the policy. I guess there's 3 very high order purposes to the policy, which is, one of them is for a high quality design outcome. So like I said, there are some artist impressions that I've submitted. Feel free to have a look at them. I don't know if we can pull them up as well if you wanted to have a look at them, but I'm the view that this does meet that criteria. You can see the proposal includes, articulation, good activation of the ground plane, mixture of materials. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, I think it does. I think everyone knows this site quite well. I think this is a fairly good outcome for this site. It does not include heritage, so I think that's an important consideration. And the purpose also includes whether it's a larger development footprint. So this site does comprise 8 allotments. It will involve being amalgamated, but as you can see from this proposal, it is going to result in a much larger development, like at least 4,000 square metres of it is for just for the supermarket. So it does comply with the purpose of the policy, and would be eligible for at least $1 million in reduction to the charges. There are some additional other criteria, and I'll just briefly walk you through them because I think this is important in your consideration. It does include an eligible use under the policy. So the approval is for multiple dwelling and for shopping centre. The only eligible use is the multiple dwelling. So not the shopping centre component. That's why I mentioned before about $1.5 million of the infrastructure charges was for the multiple dwelling. The site is located within the CBD incentives area, so that's great. And the construction value exceeds $3 million. So these are part of the criteria of the policy. There are a couple of spots in the policy where it does not comply with, but in my view, it is to be supported, but I'll walk it through. One of the criteria is it says it needs to be lodged in association with a properly made application under the Planning Act. So there's a couple of inconsistency here. Well, this application was lodged under the Economic Development Act, not the Planning Act, so it couldn't necessarily comply. But also, so I think this is a bit of a drafting oversight in the policy, and it's something that we will look at fixing in the next round. But I think the intent here is that, you know, whether it be the Economic Development Act or the Planning Act. It also says it's only lodged at the time when a properly made application is lodged. I think the intent of the policy here is that it is to be lodged at any time. I think it's even more important that this is lodged after an approval has been issued. So I think, you know, the policy does state the council does have discretion with all the criteria, but I think in this case, I think the discretion is that it can still be support. I think it's still in line with the merit or the purpose of that criteria. One of the other criteria is for it to be substantially commenced by the 2024 elections. So again, a little bit more of a drafting error, one that we'll fix. So there is another criteria, which is for it to be completed within 2 years. So we have received advice from the applicant and from the developer that there is some significant stormwater and gas relocation works that are required on the site before those works can even be commenced. So there is a definition under the policy which says substantially commenced means construction of slab or footings. So the applicant has advised that, yes, significant stormwater and gas relocation works are required before that is to occur, and they're estimating around 18 months for that work to occur. So the applicant has proposed an alternative date of that substantial commence, being the footings and being constructed by June 2028. So yeah, in my view, there are some significant issues on the site, particularly the stormwater and the gas relocation. The gas works can't be done by the applicant, has to be done by a third party, and they've advised extensive timelines. So I think there are some, I guess, factors in play that are out of, not particularly in their control. I believe that it still meets the purpose of this criteria, and I still recommend support for it despite this non-compliance. That's pretty much it. So I think, just to sum up, it meets the purpose of the policy, it meets the majority of the criteria, and where it does not meet the criteria, it'll either be on some drafting errors or oversights, and an alternative date has been proposed by the applicant that is considered appropriate given the site issues. And I recommend that the support for the $1 million reduction in infrastructure charges.
Thank you, Josh, for a very comprehensive report, and you did go into the details of timelines, which was great. I think that was a question I was going to ask, and you've covered it very well. We do have Councillor Carol Taylor with a question, and then Councillor
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this great outcome for this block, which has had a checkered past with, you know, a lot of contamination, a lot of cost to it. But my question is around a previous council. I had thought, I was surprised to see the policy hadn't been changed, but a previous council, my memory tells me, had limited the amount one applicant could have from this fund, because previously it's only been used the once, and that was with the Oaks Hotel, and there was a bit of concern amongst council that, you know, that the one that they wanted to limit it. I thought the amount I remember was 600, but obviously there's been no change to the policy. So I don't know where or why that didn't happen, but there's nothing there, is there? Is there anything to limit this amount of money, number one? And number two, and it probably does say there, how much would be left in there if this is approved? Thank you.
I'll hand over to Acting GM Curry.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. The limit is $1 million to any one applicant. There was an amount of, I believe it was $3.2 million. Josh will correct me. 3.3? No, just 3. Oh, $3 million allocated to this fund. which has not been expended at all. If council gives favourable consideration to this request, there will be still in excess of $800,000, I believe, left in the fund. The policy, all of the incentive policies were due to expire at the local government elections, so 10 months ago. As a temporary measure, council agreed to extend them until the end of the financial year. We are in the process through our economic development branch of updating all of the policies, and we'll bring those back to council with some recommendations on how we might update them.
Thank you.
To
And
follow up.
Carrie, thank you for that. But with a follow-up, it has been used because $1 million was used for the Oaks Hotel. So that's out of the same fund, isn't it? So, yeah, thank you. And thanks. So there was never any change to it, which my memory tells me was requested, but I suppose we should have followed it up. Thank you.
Next in line is Councillor Kerry. Shine.
Thanks, Chair. No, thanks, Josh, for the presentation. It is exciting development for Toowoomba, and which I and I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, are supportive of. Just a couple of questions though, and the answer was given to me at our pre-planning meeting yesterday. I was concerned that we have an overlay of limit of stories in Toowoomba of 6 stories, and this one's going to exceed that. But the explanation was that it's in the PDA, which allows that higher level. I'm not too sure what height you're allowed to go to in the PDA, but obviously 10 is within whatever you're allowed to go to. But my question relates partly to the stormwater issue and the request for the incentive payment. Is it the case that to fix the existing stormwater problem, that would take up most of the incentive payment anyway? Would that be a fair assessment?
I don't recollect the exact figure, but it was a substantial amount, and it would be the majority of that incentive policy.
Okay, no, thank you. And my other point or question or query is relation to parking. There are a lot of units, 54, I think, units, but also a shopping centre. Just wondering, you know, what particularly in relation to the shopping centre patrons, what parking will be available for them, one assumes on site or below site.
Councillor Shine, I can take that on notice. This was a planning application that was decided last year, and I just don't have that information to hand.
I'll hand to Councillor Tim in a minute, but with parking with the residential, obviously there's apportioned parking for the residential complex. And for people who don't know where we're really talking, it's Neil Street, but it's also Chalk Drive, so it gives everyone knows Chalk Drive, so it gives an idea of where it's actually situated. Councillor Tim McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, planning team. Josh, thank you for your summary. I suppose we are at a position where we're looking to encourage development within our CBD. We have a bucket of money, not huge, but set aside for this purpose. And I perhaps think that by our own policy designed to make our life easier, perhaps we've made our life a little harder. And I'm comforted by attachment 9, section 4.5 in the exclusions that says Toowoomba Regional Council has sole discretion in determining whether this incentive will be granted. And I suppose, Chair, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. With that in mind, I do want to pick up, please, Josh, if I could, my hesitation at the word consider. Could we just put grant? So that's in the recommendation. If consider strong enough, and the officer's reasoning for that wording, and if a change is required. Thank you, Chair.
Acting GM, you want to say something?
Nice pickup, Councillor. We wanted to give Council the full opportunity to consider and decide this on your own terms. Whilst Josh quite clearly said verbally that it's his recommendation that something like this be approved, we wanted to allow council the opportunity to consider it rather than foster a recommendation upon you. But if that is the recommendation, we would be happy to change the wording to endorse or approve.
Thank you. You got any follow-up, Councillor Tim?
Yeah, it sounds like I'm choking up, Chair. Look, I'm happy to change the word to endorse the request, or approves that. I'm happy with that. I think that fits very well. And Chair, I'm happy to move that, should there be a seconder.
Do we have a seconder to that motion? We do have Councillor Carroll was first in. Any discussion regarding that? No. I'll put the motion to the floor. Is that the correct procedure? All those in favour of the motion that is up on the screen? That is unanimous. Councillor Jeff, is he online?
Yes.
He's voted.
I've put my hand up. Wendy, I'll just put my hand up on the screen there for voting.
Okay. So that's a unanimous vote regarding that motion. Thank you all for that.
The next thing.
I'll hand over to Acting GM Kari and she'll go through her report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have all got a copy of the development statistics report. I'm just going to hit a few of the highlights for you. During the month, we had 210, sorry, this is the month of December, we had 210 development applications, which is down on our monthly average. It's normally 253. But one thing I would like to point out is...
It's delayed by about a minute.
Okay, we've got a slight
Really
bit of
annoying.
interference from Councillor Jeff. We're just going to mute him.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I would like to point out is that we had an extraordinarily high number of material change of use and reconfiguration of a lot applications, so 32 and 18 respectively. And while I want to point that out because these are the more complicated of our development applications when you compare them to potentially a building works or a plumbing and drainage application. So I actually went back and looked at, we always get a bit of a spike in December at the end of the calendar year, and I went back and looked at the previous December and then the December before that, and we were nearly double the number of applications for MCU and subdivision applications that came in. So that's just an interesting fact, but it demonstrates a very active development industry at the moment. So we currently have 351 live development applications. So that's development applications that are in their various stages of assessment or information request. Of those, the vast majority are planning related. So that's MCUs, plan sealing, reconfiguration of lots. So 264 of them are with planning, and operational works is the next biggest chunk at 68. I just wanted to also bring to your attention the lots in the construction pipeline. So these are lots that are either sealed or in the pipeline and will soon be coming to market. So we have operational works applications that are currently under assessment. So in that category, there's 1,486 allotments. Operational works that are approved but not yet under construction, there's 798 lots. Operational works that are under construction, so that's where we've had a pre-start meeting with the on-site contractors. So there's 847 lots with those, and the survey plans that are in for sealing, so that's lots under assessment for survey plan, is 189. So that construction pipeline for new lots is sitting at 3,320 lots. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have regarding the statistics report.
Just one question from me and then I'll hand over to the floor. Are we on target with the parameters that we've set ourselves or the state government set ourselves, or we're doing very well because there's allotments being approved or in the pipeline for Oakey, Bunkers Hill, Greenmount, Harlexton, Westbrook, lots of different areas. Are we on track or exceeding expectations?
I'm cautiously going to say that we're on track. It ebbs and flows quite substantially. I might take this opportunity actually to talk about, Matt, would you mind coming up to the front? There was some discussion yesterday at our portfolio councillors meeting about some of the interest that's been in Oakey, and I've just would like Matt to speak on that, because Oakey is one of our very important regional towns that's seen a little bit of a flurry of activity, so I might get Matt to talk about that.
Thank you, Matt. I'll hand over to you and give us an update.
We've had a little bit of a resurgence of interest in Oakey in recent times. The two applications that have probably created a bit of interest is that we've had an extension and a change for a pre-existing approval for 120 lots at Oakey Catella Road. That application has been approved, the change and the extension. Having said that, I guess the context of these is that they have been around for a fair while. This one started in 2005. So it's good that there's, like all things in life, it's nice to have interest, but also it's been around for a fair while. Also, we have a current application which we're looking at the moment, which is in information request stage. That was lodged at the end of last year, and that is for 156 lots. Now, that's an application over part of 138 to 172 Hamlin Road. And that, of course, is great that there's an application over that at the moment, but also, to put it in context, this is a successor to a previous subdivision in 2007, which had 234 lots in it. So there's, I guess, an enlivening of interest in development in this area, and I guess it's sort of watch this space to see how they progress with regards to moving down that pipeline of development.
Thank you, Matt. I'll hand over to Councillor Kerry.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Matt. Just in relation to those two developments, are either or both of them within the PIA?
I believe both of them are within the PIA. Yeah. They're land that has been designated for a fair while, so this is sort of a long-term.
Any further questions from the floor? Not to Matt. You got any other?
To the GM, if I could. Yep. Just one of those statistics you mentioned revealed that there's around about 800, I think, approvals, but not yet constructed. And that might be for a number of reasons, but are there some really ancient ones? And Matthew just mentioned 2005 and 2007. Would they sort of be in that 800 odd as well, off the top of your head, would you know, or probably have to look at?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they're unlikely to be there. Usually a planning approval lasts for either 4 or 6 years, depending on the timeframes, and then a subsequent operational works application may extend that timeframe. There's a few legalities around it. So these approved operational works not being constructed are likely to be still live applications. Once they get a bit long in the tooth, they do tend to drop off. Oh, and sorry, I've just been advised by Adam, the operational works approval only lasts for 2 years. So although there are provisions to extend those, but so they do drop off once they get to a certain age.
Thank you. Any further questions from the floor? So would somebody like to move the acting GM's report? Kerry, I believe, and Councillor Tim. Thank you. All those in favour of that report? And the online indicated a yes. Okay, so that report is carried. And that would conclude the meeting? Nope, sorry. Okay, we do have a confidential section. Sorry about that. Whoops, missed the page. We are going to, the report that's going to be delivered is not, we're closing the meeting to the public, so to speak. The report relates to current appeals to the Planning and Environment Court and current compensation claims, and therefore it is recommended that meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 254J(3)(e), legal advice obtained by the local government or legal proceedings involving the local government, including, for example, legal proceedings that may be taken by or against the local government of Local Government Regulation 2012. So I need a motion to close the meeting for that confidential session. So Councillor Rebecca, and seconded by Councillor Melissa. Ooh, bad Trevor. All those in favour? Thank you. So it's carried. We will close the meeting. We are back online. So we have now just come out of the confidential session of Planning and Environment Appeals and Compensation Claims, November and December 24, January 25. There is a motion on the books. Can I ask somebody from the floor to move? Councillor Edwina. Do we have a seconder of that motion? That motion being that the confidential report on Planning and Environment Court Appeals and Compensation Claims for November and December 2024 and January 2025 be noted by Council. So we do have Councillor Edwina who has moved that motion. Councillor Rebecca has seconded it. All those in favour of that motion? It's unanimous. So that has passed. So that brings us to the conclusion of the meeting. Thank you for your attendance, both in-house and online. And we'll now proceed to the next committee meeting of the day. Thank you so much.
So just checking, Wendy, whether I go off
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome you to the Water and Waste Committee meeting. This meeting is open to the public and will be live streamed. I'd like to thank those of you who are in the room of us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. And I believe that the Mayor is joining the meeting online.
Correct.
Thank you. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. There are no apologies. Oh, there is an apology from a leave of absence, rather, from Councillor James O'Shea, which would, I don't know if that requires any resolution. No? Okay, thank you. Well, moving on. In relation to the report that we're going to deal with, the Waste Facility Operational Services tender, I take it there are no declarations of prescribed or declarable interests in relation to that. That being the case, we will move on. The nature of the meeting issue is that it is confidential, and accordingly we will need a motion that we go into confidential mode. Councillor Trevor, seconded. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. The reason for that is this. This report seeks council resolution to award the contract for WT07-2324 Waste Facility Operational Services. It is recommended that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 254J, bracket 3, bracket G, negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government of Local Government Regulations 2012. So the motion that Councillor Monteifel is moving is that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 254J3 of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to consider the following item on the agenda. Item number 4, confidential WT07-23/24 Waste Facility Operational Services tender. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tim. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, we require a motion. The motion that's required is on screen, but I'll read it out. That the Council 1 award WTO 7-2324 Waste Facility Operational Services contract for an initial 5-year term with the option for 2 1-year extensions subject to performance and market conditions to the recommended tenderer as detailed in the confidential report titled quote WTO 7-23/24 Waste Facility Operational Services Tender unquote. 2. Authorise the Chief Executive Officer in accordance with the Local Government Act 2009 to complete and execute the formal contracts between the parties, and 3. Allocate sufficient operational budget to the Waste Services branch to fulfil Council's obligations under the contract as detailed in the confidential report titled quote WTO 7-23/24 Waste Facility Operational Services Tender unquote. Could I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Melissa, and seconded Councillor Bill. All those in favour? Carried. And the one assumes that Jeff, the Mayor is also in favour. Carried unanimously. That concludes the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Could I remind councillors to click leave meeting in broad view? Thank you. 10 or 15, yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and welcome, councillors, the Mayor who is online, councillors, our General Manager, our CEO, Acting CEO, not here at the moment, but he will be here in a moment, our General Manager Mike Brady and his team of Angelo Casagrande and Joe Bannon. Welcome to our people in the gallery. And this is the Infrastructure Committee meeting for February, and the meeting is open to the public and is also being live streamed. And welcome to those who are watching online. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Western Waka Waka, the Guyabal, the Jadawa and the Bigambul people, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and the bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. We have a leave of absence granted to Councillor O'Shea, so there's no resolution needed. And we have our Mayor, Councillor Jeff McDonald, online. Welcome, Councillor McDonald. Do we have any...
Thank you, Carol.
Do we have any declaration of prescribed... there's none advised. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, conflict of interest? No, so we're right. So we move on to the agenda, and the first item is local traffic issues, traffic signals at the intersection of Margaret Street and Mackenzie Street, East Toowoomba. Author of the report is Joe Bannon, who's Acting Principal Road Operations. I'm sure you've all met Joe, and Angelo Casagrande, who's the Acting Manager of Transport and Drainage Planning. Just note, councillors, that there are attachments attached to this report, and should you want to discuss those attachments, it would have to be in a closed session. So just take note of that. And to actually introduce the report, I'll hand over to our General Manager, Mr. Mike Brady. Thank you, Mike.
Nice bill. Good morning, councillors, and thank you for table this report, number 3 there, to you. Just a little bit of background to the report, councillors. As you would have noted, obviously, from the November meeting on issues surrounding that intersection, Curzon Street, we went through a fair discussion back then, and obviously there were some outcomes. Certain things have occurred since then. Obviously, we've put the improvements into Curzon Street, as we said we would, so they've occurred, as noted in the report. And then subsequently, we've put together for you and sent out a separate email this week all those documents that you asked for in regards to the intersection and also the funding submission, the black spot funding submission. So they've been provided to council as well. And as one of the confidential attachments there today, you've got a listing of all of those. So those are all there. And if there's any questions on any specific things there, councillor, we can touch on those. In regards to recommendation 4 from that November meeting, that's the essence of what this report's come back to you today on, and gives you sort of a fair bit of insight into what's happening. During this last, definitely since the last report, work's gone into ways of how we can improve the intersection efficiency and in respect to the operation of the traffic lights. And we've brought on a team called Transmax Consultancy, which is basically an entity under Department of Transport and Main Roads. They're working with us currently, so we've already started work on trying to look at further improvements to the phasing of the lights, the time the signals take to go around one full phase, where it can be tweaked and what improvements can be made. So that's using different elements of the technology that we've got available to us, and Transmax is very much involved with that at present. So that's working. It's somewhat iterative process in that they make some changes and then monitor how queue lengths and other elements and times work compared to their modelling, and then they make adjustments. So with us on board, they're doing that currently. The report covers off on a couple of the questions that Council was asking, in particular in respect to the operations of the traffic signals without operating lights. And as advised back in November, but further strengthen our advice in respect to that, that's probably not at all possible, councillors. Without, well, it's basically not all the professional advice we've got, both through TMR and elsewhere, very much points to that's not how the lights can operate. So that would be quite unsafe to move to wanting for any period of time through the day to turn the lights on and off. So the advice is very strong in that respect. As I said though, we're not sort of letting the opportunities go by where we can actually look at what improvements that we can bring in, and that's mainly around the timing and that through the intersection. I've also flagged in there some information about the black spot funding agreement the council signs up to, which is typical each year to what we sign in respect to the funding that we bring forth. And again, there's clauses in that are highlighted in the report that speak to if there's any significant changes warranted or needed, a process that needs to be stepped through. And again, that's strongly advised not to be making any changes without getting approvals through both state and federal levels. So, councillors, that's in essence the report. The recommendations sort of point to those outcomes, and happy to take any questions.
Councillor Gary?
Yes. So as pointed out to council in the emails that we've sent to councillors, there's all sorts of persons' names over the documents. There's other departments that are involved with these documents. They can be, we can go through them and redact as necessary names and departments and get permission from entities such as various, again, the departments or other organisations for their permission to share their information and things like that. So there's a whole privacy process that you've got to go through to put them into the public realm. So on advice through governance, our manager of governance, we spoke to him, and then I put that email out to councillors advising of the what would need to be done to put them into the public realm. They're not. Sorry.
Sorry.
They're not secretive. As I put it in that email, there's just a process, and that process takes a lot of time and resource effort to go through that quantity of documents and making sure that it meets the release. We basically did an internal RTI approach to bring the documents all together, and there was people not only in our teams but in corporate side of council assisting with getting all those documents to cover off on everything, and they're on. Have been made available to councillors both in a hard copy format and in an electronic format.
Councillor Trevor?
Obviously, this decision was made a long time ago with the black spot funding. What was the total cost that it cost? There was obviously an amount came through from the government regarding that. How much did it end up costing TRC to put in? Obviously, it's in the report somewhere, but that's a huge document.
It's in the report under issues and responses there, where the black spot funding, if you'll see there, first paragraph there, councillors, last sentence, it's up there.
Okay. So there's that amount there.
Yep.
When talking about putting the traffic lights in, was there ever a suggestion of putting a concrete strip up the middle of the street there to stop right-hand turns across traffic? Like, to me, a simple outcome, the grammar school could have had a crossing similar to Glennie on Harry Street for their peak time of coming and going from the school. And to me, it would have been a very simple solution to the whole thing, but that's just my private thought.
Yeah. I appreciate the suggestion, and we did actually take note on the eastern side of the intersection. We did take the island, the centre island, up past, what's the little street there? Connell. Yeah, so we took it up past Connell Street, as that was through our stakeholder engagement that we did in the immediate area there, that was picked up as a potential issue. So that was able to be done. Now, Connell Street's only a minor street, minor road there, and so that did, for in all intents and purposes, the same what you're suggesting there. To take it up past Curzon Street, or to keep taking it up or down the street, only pushes, as we've discussed on a number of occasions, the traffic fines a different way. And as we've explained, Toowoomba works on a grid road network. Okay, so if people can't go one way, there's a lot of benefits out of a grid road network. If there's an incident or an accident, it's easy to get around. But it also that if you start putting in barriers to traffic movements and stuff like that, as we see here, but sometimes other locations as well, the traffic will find other potential routes to get to where they wish to go. There's also quite a movement of traffic in that north-south, south-north, be it Mackenzie Street, Curzon Street sort of need, and getting to the hospital and the schools and everything in that area. So as we've explained to Council on a number of occasions, the growth in our population, the growth in the density of what's happening at this, like the schools are all expanding. So that traffic increase is one that we're having to work out how we live with, and hopefully can sort of settle on that.
Just as a follow-up, thanks Mike for the explanation. I notice in this letter dated 22, 3 allocations were done for Toowoomba areas. Were there any rural areas considered? Like, one that comes to mind is Actonvale Stud Road. Dangerous intersection there. Yes, it incorporates local and state government. Were there any rural areas put up for black spot funding?
Yes, every year we look at the rural areas. Rural sections of road are more difficult to attract black spot funding to, and unfortunately the intersections that it tends to be quite reactive, obviously. Unfortunately, over the years, we've done some major ones in the rural areas. We had the back road from Ringadan out to Oakey, where it crosses the Hayden Kingsthorpe Road. Unfortunately, we ended up having, there was 2 fatalities before we got the black spot funding to that project, and then whilst we're waiting for that funding to come through, unfortunately there was another fatality. So those, we're very conscious to look at that. We've done a fair bit in rural areas where you've got to get within a section. We've presented to council on black spots before. Within a section of rural road, you've got to get X number of accidents, and unfortunately a serious number of accidents. In regards to Actonvale Stud Road and Mara Road intersection, those have been projects that are on the to-do list, both with ourselves and probably TMR, but we've flagged those through various opportunities over the last decade. But again, funding is I think the latest estimates to take O'Mara Road intersection, which takes in Acton Vale Stud Road, and that area is somewhere in that 12 to 15 million area for upgrading to, because with O'Mara Road we want to make 4 lanes up to Cecil Plains. So there's a fair cost, and that intersection, the control of those intersections sits under the state since they intersect with State Road. Sorry?
Just as a follow-up, obviously there's been 2 deaths out there on Acton Vale Stud Road in the last 12 months, and to me it should be upgraded to the highest priority. Yes, it does incorporate State Road as well, and the widening of that road would be an advancement for everybody living out there. It seems to be getting busier and busier and busier. But when you ask the general public, as I have, black spot means somebody's died there. Somebody's lost their life there, more so than just an accident. You know, and that's, to me, is what black spot is about.
Yeah, so just with that, it's not just fatalities, it's also serious injury incidences. And in respect to this intersection, there's been two serious ones involving cyclists before it got into that black spot space. And then it also had one, again, while we were waiting for the funding. So, you know, there's been three serious cyclist accidents there, and that's what black spot funding's about, is trying to address the safety of those areas or those intersections and trying to reduce that occurring. Unfortunately, in a case like this, it does sometimes come with a little bit of potential time or inconvenience, traffic inconvenience from a time point of view when we're looking at trying to put in implement a solution in a brownfield.
And just on that too, there's been no safe way for anyone to get across Margaret Street. There's been quite a lot of appreciation, people wanting to go to the hospital, to the schools, to the kindergarten, and there was a near fatality on Mary Street, which is part of that whole area, some years ago. Unfortunately, it wasn't a fatality, but it could well have been. So, I mean, it is changing in that area. But thank you for your question, Councillor Trevor. Councillor Bill?
Subsequent to any further questions, I'm happy to move the report as recommended.
Councillor Tim?
Well, thanks, Chair. I appreciate it's been moved. I do need to ask a few questions and propose that we could air our grievances of every road in the region. There are numerous, but perhaps today we're tasked with the local traffic issues in the intersection of Margaret and Mackenzie. My question, good morning, Mike, to you and your team. The report, and I take your advice sincerely, Chair, that the attachments are confidential and I shouldn't mention details of them. I don't think we need to go into confidential, but the recommendation, if I could have it put up there, please, states that we implementation of improvements to the signal phasing. Now, I won't go into detail, but the attachment 3 confidential Transmax report, part 6 recommendations, has more recommendations than that. So actually, and I appreciate it's been moved and I'm happy to have that conversation, but Mike, I'd like your advice on note the implementation and adopt all of the improvements to part 6 of the confidential titled Transmax report.
Councillor Tim, I will come back to Councillor Bill to move that. I haven't accepted the moving yet.
Can I ask Mike if he would be open to said changes in my wording of the motion? So adopting all of the recommendations in part 6 of the Transmax report rather than just improvements to signal phasing.
Yeah. I'll just to Joe, but in essence, the recommendation one covers that off. But if you want to be specific to the Transmax report, that's Council's discretion.
Thank you, Joe.
The points in the Transmax report, there are a few points that refer to improving the traffic signal times. The report is talking about implementing a plan of changing times or setting maximum cycle times. That's what the first dot point is talking about. The second dot point is not so much an action; it's reflecting that the benefit of that may produce improved cycle times, and therefore the benefit will be that the motorist will see the cycles of the cycle of the phase changes that the lights flick through quicker. They'll move forward in queues. If it doesn't clear a queue altogether, they'll move forward in the queue. They'll see the reason for the cycle time changing through. So that second point is simply an observation saying that this should produce an effect on the way the motorists move forward. The third dot point is just pointing out that in doing this particular type of plan, it requires an increased workload on staff in monitoring and continuing to refine those timings. So all of those, we've just picked it up in the recommendation as written, that we implement those changes.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm aware of that. I suppose my issue is we have a report. How are we going to fix this? It's in confidential, so the public can't read it, right? And we're saying we'll do one line. Now, I would rather give assurance to our community that we're adopting all of the changes, and I appreciate your comment that all of the changes can be reflected in signal phasing, but I wonder if you're open to adopting in full the recommendations of Part 6 of the confidential Transmax report.
I'd probably just ask the General Manager to comment on that.
I'd be happy. This is just a suggestion, councillors. Note the implementation of improvements to the signal phasing with the aim of optimising traffic signal times in the intersection of Margaret Street and Markin Street, East Toowoomba, in line with the attached Transmax report and attachment 3. And so we could, at least that's reflecting that. If you wish to bring that into the motion, that to me, in essence, that's what I said we're doing in respect. So if you want to actually note the Transmax report in the motion, that's
Mike, thank you, and I appreciate this has been moved, and wonder if you'd have an objection to me adding something like, and I appreciate you, Wendy, for putting this up, even if it's at the end, as adopted in the confidential attachment 3 Transmax report, section 6 in its entirety.
Sorry, Wendy's just working on it. So just see if that's what you intended. I think that's got it covered, and it's a good point.
Sorry, I can't read that yet.
It's a bit small yet, Tim. Attachment 6.
In accordance with
attachment 6. Attachment 3, Wendy. Confidential attachment 3.
In its entirety?
Well, the report is the report.
Thank you.
So,
I'm happy with that. Thank you. I can second.
So, Councillor Melissa, I'll take one more question, whatever, and Councillor Rebecca. But we do have a mover. I may call for a seconder before we go for more questions. Mover, Councillor Bill Carl, seconded Councillor Tim McMahon. And now, Councillor Melissa, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thanks, Mike, for the report and everyone. Can I just ask, I'm a little bit curious as to why the Transmax report is confidential. I can't see anything in there that deems it confidential. So could you please enlighten me on that?
Look, it's when we engage these parties, unless we go specifically and get their permission to put them out in the public realm, they're there as a report that we hold internally. So they may want certain redactions. So if it goes into the public realm, so it's not saying it can't go into the public realm, but I'd have to take advice through our government side and also ask Transmax for their permission to make it available in the
Well,
public
thanks,
realm.
Mark. I would appreciate if we could investigate that before the ordinary meeting next week, because,
Okay.
through reading this, I can't see anything in there that needs to be redacted that is confidential as such, that can't be in the public realm. So, and I also note the photo on the front of the report is actually a photo of Brisbane. It's not even a photo of Toowoomba.
I'll pick that. You need to change that too.
That'd be lovely. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you, thanks, Mike and Joe and Angelo. Earlier today, during the Planning and Development Committee meeting, one of the aspects that we considered in that was the ministerial designations that are live in the region, and one that was tabled in there was a MID that was issued towards the end of 2023 for Toowoomba Grammar School, Margaret Street, Harry Street in East Toowoomba. And so my question is, do we know whether that MID, or any MIDs, but that MID has taken into account the holistic traffic parking flow in the area? And I ask because I think that impacts are foreseeable with that, and we sort of are in this position where if we look too narrowly at an issue, we end up getting these perverse outcomes where the traffic just spills in somewhere else and pops up elsewhere. And I think I've said before, it's like playing whack-a-mole because it just goes somewhere else. There's work being done on that MID at the moment. Do we know what impact that's going to have and whether or not that impact's being considered either by the state or is it being considered within council?
Thank you, Councillor. You're correct. There's a proposed set of traffic lights at the intersection of Harry's and Suffolk, and councils may be aware that Toowoomba Grammar now owns property on the southern side of Harry Street. And obviously part of their development now sees that happening. There's also in that area currently a school crossing, what do we call them? A lady there. And so all of that's been taken into account. There's an upgraded bus stops going in. There's 3 bus stops going in along Harry Street as well. Where they pull over now on the shoulder. So that whole, what would be the northern side of Harry Street, in that area just to the west of Suffolk Street, is going through a total sort of redesign and review. They have taken into account, they have done a traffic study. I asked them some time ago to look at a traffic study that was broader than just that intersection. But there is the likelihood, you've got Ipswich Street, John Street, you've got obviously Mackenzie Street, that there is likely to be some movement of traffic to using other streets, particularly in what will be the busier times. Now, we've asked them also to work with Transmax from the start to work in on to make the operation of those lights as efficient as possibly can and to reduce the potential diversion of traffic to other areas. Their report at this stage indicates not a huge difference to traffic movements than what happens there, particularly through those peak school times in the morning and in the afternoon. It's probably a much simpler intersection to navigate when it comes to how traffic will move through there going forward, in that it's only a T intersection, and hence outside of those sort of key school times and school terms, the phasing on the lights can be quite different to, make sure that Harry Street in itself, which is the primary street, is actually given priority through those times. So I don't expect to see huge impacts and the information coming through. That said, it's got to go through an operational works approval through council, which takes it through our development team. And so all the reports and final designs and everything will come up through there.
If I could just have a second follow-up. Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you for that, Mike. That's good information. And I note that you said that the state had undertaken that traffic study, and I don't expect you to have the developers, the school, the proponent had undertaken that traffic study. And I don't expect you to have the information at hand, but if we could get an understanding of the scope of that study and if it is appropriate and possible to make sure that we are broadening out these traffic studies as much as practical and possible, because the impacts are really widespread in that grid system where we've got a lot of educational facilities and hospitals and residential and. Thanks.
Councillor Bill?
Just a quick comment, if I may, Chair. And Councillor Rebecca's hit on a really, really good point. And I recall multiple occasions in development meetings around this table over the years of this very fact challenging not just this neighbourhood, but many neighbourhoods and for many different types of development. And it comes back to a term in the application or for the applicant to then contest around reasonable and relevant conditions. And I suggest it's an opportunity for us to prosecute this in the drafting of the new planning scheme and just what we can implement, because in many instances, and I call childcare centres, all sorts of things that have a significant impact on suburban traffic movements, just not just in their local neighbourhood and even in their local suburb, but how they attract non-local traffic through residential areas. That's a challenge for us, and it's never been any different. So I think it's a key thing, Mr. Brady, for us to raise about just how far can we push the envelope in reasonable and relevant conditions. And this is the danger of an impact assessable application rather than code and being very specific about it. So it's a universal problem that I've experienced multiple times sitting around this table, and there's losers, and that's called a community, because I don't think the conditions are firm enough.
Mr. Brady will comment on that, but I mean, we have to remember here in this precinct also is the hospital.
Yeah,
and
I totally agree.
You know, it's been forgotten in all of this, but there's a lot of people there with disabilities in wheelchairs and all sorts of things.
Councillor Carroll, or Chair, I totally agree. It's appropriate. But
So
I'm raising the issue because as we experience further infill and further infill development from these school precincts as well, there's multiple types of infill development, and not just infill. Greenfield is an opportunity to address it appropriately.
And of course the mids make it a little bit more difficult as well. So I'd like to ask Mr. Brady to address your question.
Yeah, I concur with you, Councillor, in respect to what we can do with the planning scheme to you know, we'll see what we can work with the planning team there. In this case, as pointed out by the Chair, it is a ministerial infrastructure designation, and this is one of the challenges we have with them. It basically says of the proponent applicant to work with us or to liaise with us. And in this case, in respect to Toowoomba Grammar, I'll give them kudos here. They have been working with us now for about the last 12 months on this one to try to get the best outcome, not just from the traffic point of view, but by, you know, the camphor laurels. So we don't necessarily have to take out any of the major camphor laurels. There's a couple that are scraggly. We're trying to work even the bus stops around them. There's a bit of trimming of branches and things like that. So we've given them a lot of support to try to get the best outcome for that location. But under the mid, which sort of trumps our planning scheme, it does do that. And we've got not dissimilar things with the new Toowoomba Hospital and things like that, how we're going to manage traffic around there. So again, they can work with council, liaise with us, but the mids are a little bit more challenging to get those good community outcomes. But in this case, to Toowoomba Grammar's credit, they have been very open to taking on board council's input today.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Duena? I'll allow a few more questions and then we might move on with, we've got Councillor Kerry waiting as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick. Mike, a comment, if I may. Thank you for the report, and I think that the committee will welcome a 20 to 40 second improvement on cycle length. So thank you. But following on from Councillor Rebecca's question just with Herrie Street, I do also want to flag that we need to look at this from a really holistic approach, and whether we would also consider, instead of putting another set of traffic lights in there, moving them further along, instead of on the corner of Suffolk, moving along Herries and having just an electronic pedestrian school crossing that you see in other cities, where sometimes during school hours they're just flashing orange, and when the children want to cross they push the button and it's green most of the time, but when the children are crossing it then goes orange and then red, so the children can cross in between classes. But when the classes are running, because most classes run for 30 or 40 minutes, it's then green, enabling everyone else to keep moving. Just a consideration. Mike, thank you.
Happy to take that point on board and look at that a little bit further. I suppose when we're considering that sort of Herrie Suffolk, and I know I won't spend too much, just to the east of that is one of the main intersections into the school itself. So we're not sort of caught between, we don't want to, and that's sort of left in, left out. There's, the aquatic centre there, the use of that. So the traffic in that area is coming from different directions, and it's not just the intersection that's having to be considered when we're looking at how best to manage traffic along that section. So it's, but we'll take your point on board.
Yeah, it's tricky. I just don't want to add an extra layer of complication, just to be aware, and obviously our guys are the experts, but Glennie does it quite well on Herrie Street, and it's got two campuses. It's got a primary and a secondary, so it's just looking at the other options, that's all.
Yeah.
Councillor Kerry, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'm fortunate that Councillor Duena mentioned the Glennie situation, which seems to work pretty well. I do wonder why the need for lights has come up for in the Suffolk Street discussion that we've had before, whether the current method of control has proved to be inadequate, whether there's been accidents or whatever, reasons similar to the justification for black spot. Are there any instance evidence of that? Or from my point of view as a travelling motorist, it's not just the school community that's involved, it's the travelling motorists. Margaret Street's been critically inhibited because of the new two sets of lights there. The next street parallel to it on the southern side is Herrie Street, and we're now proposing a set of lights there as well. I would strongly urge that the solution that Councillor Duena has alluded to, that's been adopted successfully at Glennie, might well be worthwhile being considered. I appreciate that there are traffic experts and people who give advice in that regard, far more beneficial than anything I could come up with, but nevertheless I think it's worthwhile being undertaken. My question though is that, getting back to Margaret Street, what are the reasons to support the contention that it's unsafe to operate with non-functioning traffic lights? I mean non-functioning from time to time, not non-functioning at all, but that was the suggestion I think the Mayor made, that perhaps it could operate during school peak hours to and from schools. So what are the reasons to justify that contention, or assertion rather, that it would be unsafe to adopt that alternative?
Thank you, Councillor. If I could just go to issues and responses, Wendy, and the operation of traffic signals without operating lights, that paragraph, if we can bring that up, those paragraphs.
I think it's up front.
Not on the screen yet.
What page?
Yeah, can we... Councillors, in the report, under issues and responses, first subsection there, operation of traffic signals intersection without operating lights. It's on 1, 2, 3, fourth page of the report. And back up, Wendy, please. Thanks. Just there. Yep. And there's some of the points raised. It's also in further detailed in the Transmax report, and they give further information there. So, look, the advice we've got, and concurs with the professional advice of our own officers, is that whether it be TMR, Brisbane City Council, for that matter, some of the information that TMR provided us from the US, operating traffic signals outside of, in a non-functional manner, is deemed unsafe. It's not just the time that the lights are on and off, it's the whole line marking that you have at an intersection. You put the intersection in for the traffic signals. So if you're going to, you have different operations if you don't have lights. So if you're going to, as what was there previously, so in essence, you're causing confusion for the motorists. So it makes it a lot, it causes a higher safety risk, and which is not supported by any road authority, be it in Australia or probably elsewhere. So, yeah, and there's a lot of good reasoning why. So that's, yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I take it the main reason I would have thought is that the Department of Transport of Main Roads won't allow it. So is that the case?
Look, that is that's a key. Being our road, they can't categorically say that council can't. They can't direct council directly. We take them as the experts, the road experts for State of Queensland. They own the entity Transmax. That's where very highly skilled professional traffic engineering practice they maintain there. Similar, Brisbane City Council is a huge city council in Australia, which has a huge number of community issues with, be it traffic lights or anything else. So they're forever trying to improve their systems and processes as well. But one thing that nobody does is turn the lights off during the day.
Councillor Shine, you might remember in one of your reports, which is confidential, there's unequivocal evidence to show that accidents and serious injury are not confined to school hours or peak times in traffic.
No, the difficulty for us today is that this is a matter of considerable public interest, and if we were limited in giving reasons why we're adopting a decision because it's confidential, is regrettable, I would have thought. And I think just as a follow-up, just talking about the Herrie Street one again, I thought that would have been an ideal situation where you could turn it off for most of the day, other than when kids come to and leave the school. But from what you're saying, I think it stays predominantly on green for most of the day until somebody presses the button to walk across.
We're discussing these lights at the moment and how they go forward. And councillors, I've been the road safety councillor responsible for this council since 2008. Public opinion is one thing, road safety and the safety of our community and our pedestrian traffic and cyclists is another. And we need to take that responsibility very carefully and very seriously. Thank you. Is there any more questions? If not, I will put the motion. It was moved by Councillor Bill Cale and seconded Councillor Tim McMahon. And the recommendation is that there's a note the implementation of improvements to the signal phasing with the aim of optimising traffic signal cycle times at the intersection of Margaret Street and Mackenzie Street, East Toowoomba, in accordance with the confidential attachment 3 Transmac report to the confidential report titled Local Traffic Issues, Traffic Signals at the intersection of Margaret Street and Mackenzie Street, East Toowoomba, and 2, does not support operating the intersection at Margaret Street and Mackenzie Street, East Toowoomba, with non-functioning traffic signals. So we have a mover and a seconder, and now do we need to go into debate? If not, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? It's carried. Those against, we won't record that because it's just committee. So you have your opportunity next week. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Sorry. Oh, sorry, thank you very much. Thanks, Councillor McDonald. We move on to our next agenda item, which is it is a confidential report, and it's on the Regional Active and Public Transport Advisory Committee, appointment of community members. I'll ask for a motion to close the meeting. And I'll find the reasons here. And Wendy's got it all here. I just can't find it. I think I've got too much paper. Here, thank you. The report contains information that potentially identifies individuals, and therefore it is recommended that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 254J3F, matters that directly affect the health and safety of an individual or a group of individuals of local government regulation. We've got a mover and a seconder for the closing. Moved Councillor Edwina, seconded Councillor Gary. Those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. these, the names are here now.
Yep.
Yeah, so they become public because they're in the recommendation.
Yeah, they do.
So,
They become public.
they become public now. Yeah, councillors, just bringing your attention, and you probably noticed that the recommendation names the people that we're endorsing. So just be aware of that. All right, you've got a mover for that? Sorry, yes, I can read them out. So that the recommendation is, thank you, Councillor Tim, that Council appoint the following 9 community members to the Regional Active and Public Transport Advisory Committee. Bruce Steele, Dr Anthony Kimpton from UniSQ, Anna Campbell from Queensland Walks, Tony Platts, Andrew Demack from Bicycle Queensland, Dr Lindsay Bell, Janine Martin, Alicia van der Heever, and Michael Appley. And Council note, 2 departmental advisors to the Regional and Active Public Transport Advisory Committee, the Department of Transport and Main Roads, and who they recommend, and TransLink. And I'd also just like to add to that what a wonderful response we've had to our call for expressions of interest, and thank all those people very much. Do we have a mover? Moved Councillor Edwina, seconded Councillor McDonald, Councillor Tim, and I just need to mention, I'm sorry I got mixed up, Councillor McDonald has left the meeting. So are those in favour? Thank you, it's carried. And that brings to an end the infrastructure committee meeting for February. I'd like to actually thank, I didn't thank at the start, our council business for their attention to detail and their presence. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.